Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to this learning experience brought to you by AWS and Accenture. My name is Cody, and I'd like to welcome you back to Techstrong Learning for yet another exciting program ahead. Before we get things rolling, I do have just a couple of housekeeping notes I'd like to review. First, today's session is being recorded, so if you miss any of our discussion, perhaps you'd like to rewatch or share with your team, you will be receiving an email with a link to access the recording on demand shortly after we conclude this session today. If you'd like to engage with us, there are a couple of options to do so. There's the chat tab on the right side of your screen where we'd like you to send in your general thoughts and comments. However, if you do have specific questions, just to help us out with tracking, we want you to send your questions to that Q&A tab specifically. If we are unable to address all of your questions today, we're going to make sure that the speakers receive your questions and they'll be able to follow up with you after the fact. So without much further ado, let's go ahead and kick off our program. The topic today is using cloud migration to increase your CX agility. And leading our conversation today is Nathan George, Connected Customer Experience Lead at AWS. So I'm just going to pull up their slides, drop off, and let them take over from here.
Well, hello to everyone who's joined us on this webinar. We really appreciate you dedicating the time for what I think will be a really interesting hour-long webinar. Whether you're watching that live or on the recording, we really appreciate it. The subject we're going to be talking about and exploring is what seems to be an increasingly urgent need to migrate your contact center to the cloud with all the potential disruption that can bring and cost to your business and impact to your customers. It can sometimes be daunting, but it could actually be the single biggest opportunity that you have for developing a step change in agility to your business, savings to your bottom line, and relief sometimes to your agents who feel at times that they are at breaking point. So my name is Nathan George, and I'm going to be your host on this webinar today. I've been in the contact center industry now for 25 years, and I now lead AWS's contact center partnership with Accenture here in EMEA. And I'm joined by these three amazing people with whom I have the privilege of working. So guys, if you can come on screen, and I'll introduce you as you do so. So Dilnisin Bayel leads Accenture's Global Advanced Customer Engagement practice in their consulting division. Sean Gunther is the global lead for business development for Accenture's contact center practice with AWS. And Duncan works for Citizens Advice, a large public sector organization in the UK. And he's led a migration that's pretty significant in size and complexity from a legacy system to Amazon Connect with Accenture. So it's a really interesting story. I know you're going to love that. Okay, so here's what we're going to cover. We're going to take a look at what's happening in the market right now at the beginning. There are some big shifts occurring in consumer expectations. The legacy platforms are coming to the end of life, and there are all sorts of possibilities for what generative AI and other machine learning technologies can do for customer experience, and Dilnisin is going to be covering that. Then I'm going to spend just a few minutes unpacking what AWS and Accenture have built together by way of a contact center offering and practice. And then Sean is going to take us through some of the key issues that distill out Accenture's best practice from all the experience that they've had with clients who've migrated from legacy systems to an AWS architecture. And then we're going to hear from Duncan about the experience that he's had and maybe some of the lessons that he's learned from this really big project, roughly around 10,000 users, what actually ended up being roughly 250 separate contact centers. So really looking forward to diving in. Okay, so let's dive straight in. It's probably not unreasonable to assume that if you were on this webinar, you've probably not migrated your contact center to the cloud yet. And with all the buzz around it, you would be forgiven for thinking that you are behind the curve. The reality is actually that, at least as of last year, Gartner estimates that there is still about 65 to 70% of the market that has yet to migrate. So in one sense, you are in good company. And of course, there is a strong argument to make that by making plans to migrate now, you will actually be benefiting from the experience that others have had before you. And there's always this trade-off, isn't there, between benefiting from the experience of others on one hand, and on the other, not being too late. Otherwise, particularly in this area of customer experience, customers are fickle and they will switch allegiance to someone who is able to deliver the experience and the quality of experience that they expect. Because end customers are frequently frustrated by the ways that they are forced to interact with organizations that they do business with. Sometimes, those organizations only support a few of the channels that they want, or if they do support multiple channels, they're not aware of the conversations that have occurred across them. And interactions can be anything but frictionless sometimes. And the technology many organizations are using is brittle, it's inefficient, it's labor intensive, it's expensive, it requires significant time and effort to simply maintain the status quo. And all of this makes it nearly impossible to innovate, to scale, or to infuse any machine learning or AI capabilities into the platform. And organizations that operate contact centers want to transform their business in these areas. They want to have a system that's super simple, that's personalized, that's agile, but they're just stuck maintaining instead of innovating. And on top of this, the old legacy systems are reaching their end of life, and the vendors of those systems are forcing customers off of them through a variety of different tactics. And then if that wasn't enough, along comes generative AI, right, with ChatGPT exploding onto the scene of public consciousness at the end of last year. And all of a sudden, the board is asking, what is the company doing to harness generative AI, particularly in the contact center, where it is so obviously relevant? So, Dilnissen, you speak with contact center leaders and customers all day long. Can you take us through your perspective of what's happening in the market?
Yes, indeed. I mean, you made a very good intro about the situation. It's both the contact center and I think broader customer service that is going to be revisited and reimagined, because it's going to be, I think, a period of seeing contact center not only as a channel, but integrated with the rest of the omni-channel and bringing new experiences to both customers and also the workforce. A recent study, actually 2 recent studies we made, if we can move to the next slide, highlights 2 facts. One is the change on the customer side. Our recent study on human paradox and life centricity shows that customers have been changing and their life purpose becoming a more important element in making decisions. And when they think about how the companies they work with are kind of meeting these expectations, there is a gap. So a lot of the decisions they are giving in their life, they're more attentive about the purpose and the way they approach the life. And they want to have the companies who are servicing to them to meet these expectations. So they're not only just blind in terms of brand loyalty, and they are not just questioning the commercial aspects of price and etc., but they're looking for also like how they can get connected with these brands in their life. The other part of the story is important, I think. Service, which used to be more a cost center, is becoming a more value center, because I think if you think the 2 things together, service is the key kind of area which brings the engagement, which brings the experience, and which creates loyalty. Because if you are good in giving the right service when your customers want and need, then you create more positive engagement, you create more loyalty, and you are able to actually differentiate against your competition. So this service becoming a value and adding value to the life of the customer is going to be the key dimension we will be focusing going forward. If we can move to the next slide. And in this context, I think change is not kind of an option anymore. Change is required in order to differentiate and in order to survive. It's going to be more like change now and act now mindset coming more and more. And I think also some of the generative AI related discussions are making it even faster. If we go to next one. When we look at the current context, I think as customers, we can also confirm that even if you are talking with the same company, like a bank or a telco or a utility is, from different channels, it's not the same experience. There is a multi-version of the same experience that is kind of being delivered. So every channel has their own service catalog. Every channel says, I can do this, I cannot do this. And then in order to connect the dots, you as the customer need to keep the history. So like if you start something in a chat channel, and then if the chat is not able to finish it and refers you to the contact center or a physical location, then you need to explain the story, what has happened before, and you need to also do the activities and make the connections. While the essence and the critical component of the feature will be really bringing all these channels together and making the sales and service loop converge. So thinking customer journey as one, because a lot of the functional silos in the organizations has been also breaking the experience into parts. It was marketing, sales, service, and etc., which was in kind of discrete silos, while what we are seeing is thinking the sales and service loops together like an infinite loop, bringing all the channels together in the relationship and engagement, not only while you are trying to sell something, but throughout the experience, and then making it more personalized, more proactive, more human, and automated will be the new way going forward. And then it's going to be a more unified relationship and engagement. And this will give more ability for your internal employees. This will give a different experience to your customers. You're going to empower the workforce and bring the full kind of force of the platform. So you will be able to leverage the platforms at their more advanced levels. If we go to the next one, when we think about how these can come together, I think the three elements are really crucial to make sure it's not one or the other, it's the three together in order to make this sales and service loop connected and in order to manage a really omni-channel, infinite loop-like an experience, which is the reimagine experience. I think this is important because usually the first waves of all these digital transformations have been more focusing only on the customer experience, but employee experience was a bit lagging behind. But when we think of employees are part of that servicing component or kind of agents in the servicing, they need to know what has happened in the other channels, and they need to have more digital support and AI support as they service their customers. So making the omni-channel not just a digital side, but also human assisted plus non-human assisted part, and making the innovation of the journeys. So rethinking the journeys as we think, okay, if it is omni-channel, if it is sales and service loop, how this is going to be working in the new way. So not just fixing today's problems, but rethinking what's the ideal way to do it. The other part is reimagining the workforce, which is more really superpowering the human and making the human supported with digital elements. So instead of human to learn through trainings, how you're skilling them dynamically as they service to their customers, or how they're making them more supported with digital tools as they experience difficult moments with their customers, is going to be more and more important. And of course, in order to reduce the effort after the calls, let's say, it's going to be important to bring the cognitive operation components into it, because you need to think as a process, not just, okay, agent does the call, somebody else takes over, and etc. Again, the silo mentality needs to be removed from the full equation. And then from a platform perspective, it's the omni-channel. I mean, of course, as we are also working together, it's the cloud journey, which is already in the agenda of a lot of these companies. It's the AI. So I think in the current wave, as well as talking about what's the next contact center platform on the cloud, it's the AI, because a lot of the intelligence, and in order to make these experiences more personalized, more proactive, it's important to bring AI and use as much as possible AI in every moment, and generative AI adding a lot of, I think, flexibility in some of these areas, and understanding the full customer intelligence, because now we are also seeing it's not just replacing the contact centers, but it's all the CRM, contact center, the sales and service, the use of AI are really all converging, and everybody is trying to make sure it's one connected architecture for the customer facing capabilities they're orchestrating. So I think we're going to see a lot more also emphasis not only on the contact center part, but how that's going to be an integral part of the full picture, and anything that should be revisited in the CRM side, in other channels, making it full and connected and seamless. We're going to be also discussing those. And when we think of the value that you can create out of these journeys, it's not OPEX only. So there's of course significant improvement on the cost reductions, but there is the opportunity to improve the customer lifetime value, because you make your customers happy and they're going to be also keeping their loyalty. And also revenue, which is, we know that when you're able to give a successful service experience, then you have more opportunity to offer something new and customers will be more receptive. So making also upsell and cross-sell opportunities out of those conversations that are triggered from service, and selling through service is going to be important. And we see also the results are improving in this area, and the customer satisfaction, which is definitely, every experience is important, and if you're able to really deliver this omni-channel experience, that will be elevating the overall satisfaction level. If we can go to the next slide. And when we think about the potential change in the mix from today to future, we are also seeing that with these journeys, we are going to see also a lot more digital assistance, virtual assistance. There's going to be also the human chat enablement. So it's even the chat will be supported with more intelligence, and the chat agents will get more support in order to make more effective conversation flows. So there will be the change in terms of the mix of the way you were handling your customer service through different channels. And I think going forward, we're going to also see not only the text content, it's going to be also more rich content in a more personalized way being created during these flows, because generative AI will give us also the opportunity to create more personalized content in the conversations that we are having with the customers. So from moving the kind of reversing the pyramid will be what we are going to see. Of course, in that case, we will also see that some of the commodity things that you might be doing at the moment with your contact center agents will not be done by them, but the complexity of the things that you are handling in the contact centers will increase. So the qualification of the agents will be like the relationship managers solving complex situations for their customers, will be the role of remote support in that sense going forward. So telephony will be supported with agents who are more qualified and more addressing complex situation and solving more problems rather than just answering the inquiries. So we're going to see the reversal of the pyramid, but from a qualification perspective, we're going to also see the change in the qualification of the remote assisted channels. If we can go to the next slide. And in terms of generative AI, as you pointed out, Nathan, clients, everyone is talking about it. And of course, there are pros and cons, but I think there are more pros that we can leverage and try. And it's more like what else we can create with generative AI and how we can make it a value to the as-is processes, our business as usual, and how we can improve new experiences, create new experiences, and improve the current way of doing will be important. We see some of the use cases coming more evident. If we can move to the next one. So there's a couple of dimensions we are seeing. If you think about before contact, during contact, and after contact, in the context of contact center or customer service, from a customer perspective, we are going to see a lot more use of personalization, both in terms of understanding the sentiment and also more making predictive support, or the conversation enrichments, or the conversational virtual agents, which is more self-service enablement and multi-language, because a lot of the cases, especially in Europe, language is not that easy. Every country has their own unique language, and you need to be attentive in the nuances of the way language is used. So this is going to be more from a customer perspective, and from an employee perspective, there's going to be both productivity support and effectiveness support, because it will be both helping the agents to use the conversation or the dialogue duration with their customer more effectively, so that they're going to get enough coaching, and also co-pilot like technologies, which is more helping them in order to summarize, send it to the complaint department, or send it to another group, or send it back to maybe the customer as a meeting note. So a lot more technologies will be used, and also knowledge management. A lot of the cases we also see that contact center teams are having difficulty to reach out to the same required content in the same way. They need to use different tools or different systems. So we're going to also see more, I think, progression in these use cases. These are some of the selected ones which we see they're becoming interesting for wide use in this space.
That's great, Dilnisin. Thanks so much. I guess before I let you go, one question that I have is, you listen to all this generative AI stuff, is like, technology goes through these technology hype cycles. And I guess my question is, like, where are we on that? Like, is this a fad for now? Or is it something that will deliver a step change in the quality of CX that contact centers can deliver? Because it kind of feels like something really significant happened when ChatGPT was launched. What are you saying? What's your perspective?
I mean, I think it's not going to be like the hype. We're going to, I think, see a lot of use cases which are really tangible and hitting the current problem points, and also delivering a change in the way we think how they can be handled. So as at the moment, so like the language or the sentiment or the way we support human with digital, we're seeing a lot of tangible use cases that we can bring into the people and humans. So I think it's not going to replace human, but it's going to give a lot of superpower to human to both do self-service things, or to get the right support from another human supporting that service in the right way. So I think it's not going to be just a hype or fashion. But of course, the right way of using it, the ethical way, the responsible way will be important, because we can easily also create unintended consequences out of the great uses of the technology, as we kind of go into the excitement of trying new things. Because everything generative AI is learning at the moment is from what we have been sharing over the last decade publicly, and now it's learning and reusing it for our benefit. So making it fit the right intentions and making it really serving to the human, again, as customers, as employees, as whoever is going to use it, is going to be our responsibility as technology companies, as consulting companies going forward. But I think it's going to give us a lot more simplicity, a lot more time to do other things and improve our life. So I'm more on the supportive part, which can ease our lives and simplify it, as long as we use it in the right, responsible way.
Really interesting, Dilnishin. Thanks so much for your input on all of that. Fantastic.
Thank you so much.
All right. So if you want to dive deeper, AWS and Accenture actually did a webinar together last month about generative AI. So be sure to catch that if you want to know more. And we'll put a link in the chat for how you can get there a bit later. Okay, so I'm going to spend just a few minutes unpacking what Accenture and AWS have in the contact center space as an offering. It's called the Connected Customer Experience, and it's been in the market now for, well, ever since AWS launched Amazon Connect about 6 years ago. So CCE, as we call it, is built on Amazon Connect as the core platform, but what you see here are the most commonly used other AWS products. We actually call them services, which confuses people sometimes. But the most commonly used other AWS products, right? And these are out of over 200 different products. These are the ones that typically get deployed in the contact center. And you might notice that nearly all of these are AI or machine learning products, whether it's Contact Lens that analyzes what's going on in the call, in the interaction, so it surfaces insights on what's actually happened, or Wisdom that surfaces useful documents or suggestions to the agent, or Lex that allows you to, it understands natural language and allows you to build conversational interfaces. So with a click of a button, you can turn on, say, transcription and just transcribe everything that has been said on both sides of the call into text. You only pay for what you use, and if it has value, then continue to use it. If not, just switch it off. There are no licenses to buy, no APIs to set up, no high watermarks to kind of plan for, no latencies to worry about. So this allows you to experiment, right? So you can conduct A/B tests on different paths or experiences that you've designed to deliver to your customers, and really start doubling down on the experiences and pathways that customers have with your contact centers that allow you to start to differentiate yourself and pull away from the pack. And what happens is that the team that used to spend 100% of their time just keeping the lights on with an on-prem platform are actually freed up to become agents of change in designing and delivering new experiences to customers. And Accenture have taken, that core contact center platform and built a whole load of assets and accelerators around it. And this just gets to the point I made at the beginning, that by planning to migrate now, you'll actually be benefiting from the huge amount of experience that Accenture has built up worldwide on migrating customers from legacy platforms to Amazon Connect. And we don't really have time on this webinar to kind of delve into that very much, but just to kind of mention very briefly, the CCE accelerators are designed to reduce the time and cost of your migration. So there are reference architectures, there are guidelines, there's training, there's design patterns, there are pre-built integrations with other common platforms like Salesforce and ServiceNow. Accenture have intent libraries, which are like hundreds of industry-specific and cross-industry intents that customers can call in wanting to have resolved in the contact center. So you can just take those, bolt those on, and quickly deliver value. And then they have what they call industry cartridges that are standardized, pre-built and reusable cases to allow for really rapid deployment of industry-tailored virtual agents. And then they have a few products that they've built themselves, in fact, and often use that with Amazon Connect. Calm is a data-led machine learning approach to identify the real root causes and reasons that your customers are calling, and the exact sequence of steps that your agents have to go through as they address those calls. Kite, or the conversational AI platform, provides a data-driven conversational AI solution that can be scaled and managed across the whole enterprise. And the Unified Agent Portal, or UAP as it's known, actually it's a platform that Duncan and Citizens of Vice have deployed. It's based on Amazon Connect, and it streamlines voice and chat and video, like all the different channels, into one user-friendly kind of single pane of glass. So that's what they've built, and together we have had a lot of success with all this. So lots of customers, whether it's Standard Bank in South Africa, Barclays worldwide, the California State Automated Welfare System, Vodafone Business in the UK. We've developed on the Kite platform We really rapidly had to handle huge volumes of Ukrainian refugees and calls being made from them into Germany as they were migrating. AWS is Accenture, sorry, is AWS's largest Connect partner worldwide, and they have deployed just over 250 clients now on Connect. And on top of that, Accenture's own business processing outsourcing operations have migrated around 400 of their customers onto Connect with about 20,000 agents. And in case you thought these projects always take months to do, and of course, you know, big complex ones do take time, but the opposite can also be true. So during the pandemic, of course, there was a lot of stress around as remote agents had to be immediately provisioned for, and Accenture proved their ability to migrate customers really rapidly. And the most impressive one migrated 16,000 agents in a 6-week period. And that customer has now gone on to migrate 25,000 agents onto the platform since. And as you might expect, in order to be able to claim these credentials, Accenture have hundreds of trained experts on Connect that are located all over the world. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to my colleague Sean from Accenture now. Sean, could you maybe introduce your role and take us through how Accenture looks at helping their clients through this big task of migrating their enterprise contact centers, and just share some of your experience?
Absolutely. Thank you, Nathan. So yes, my name is Sean Gunther. I am the global market lead for the CCE program, the Connected Customer Experience. I am also our global chief Amazon Connect architect. So kind of the head geek of the program. As we think about kind of all the things that you and Dylan have talked about today, one of the things that I think comes abundantly clear is, okay, how do we do this? How are clients thinking about it? And I think, Nathan, you really talked about kind of the paralysis that clients get into of trying to figure out how to think about change. We can go to the next slide. I think there's really a 3-stage kind of approach, and it's really that how do you eat a pizza, right? It's one slice at a time. Technology is a really small part of that, right? No airplane is built by wrenches alone, right? A wrench doesn't actually make an airplane, but it's a critical component of building a successful flying machine. Technology is that same kind of a driver. And what we are really looking for is the right changes to make, the right places to insert technology, the right order of operations to look at things. So here at Accenture, we think about that as an approach to how do you solve the right problems, right? How do you define what that problem set is? Then think about how do you blueprint those? How do you define the path through solving that problem? And then how do you deliver it while kind of monitoring and scaling that problem? Take the next slide. The where do you get started ends up being the real money ball for that, right? When you really think about how do we start a migration, it starts with thinking about the big picture, right? You are thinking both big and small. How to take that first step, which slice to eat, requires that you analyze the entire pizza. The way that you approach the transformation, the way that you approach change is by first really analyzing what it is that you need to do. One critical thing to remember is that no matter how pressed clients are for change, they really have to think about the entire impact, right? It's not just about the contact center personnel. It's about all of the data scientists that feed off of the data that the contact center generates. It's all of the CX personnel. It's all of the leaders that are doing reporting. It's all of the agents that are feeding into the system, right? It's this entire ecosystem of the client's culture that is impacted by these technology-driven changes. And that planning, that ability to really think about those impacts really helps to define what the highest value steps are. Next slide, please. That we think about in terms of a North Star and a roadmap, right? If you define your goal, that doesn't exactly tell you how to get to your goal. You are looking for, how do you chart these multiple paths through? How do we think about the data science path? How do we think about sales? How do we think about service? Where on this, these various lines does ChatGPT touch? Does generative AI touch? Where are the places that we can make first steps? All of these bits swirling around. We find these kinds of diagrams, these kinds of North Star diagrams, to be very useful in plotting out those major milestones along the roadmap. And that can help identify which are the most appealing, the most valuable, the most worthwhile first steps to take. This ensures that you are keeping alignment across the organization. It also ensures that you are optimizing your spend, right? This is a critical piece as CX leaders are out there making changes in the field. A lot of our clients are talking about, I've been trying to make CX changes and I'm not really seeing the value of it. And a lot of times that's because they've started with a technology and they've tried to implement an end state without really thinking about those milestones as we go through. Next slide, please. What we seek to do is really tie that back to data, right? Really use the data-driven decision making, right? So you take chat, right? Implementing chat can be incredibly valuable, but there are some industries, there are some clients where their customers are going to be extremely adapted to voice, and chat may be a real challenge to convert them over to. Thinking about those kinds of data points can really help to define where you're going and how. But the real goal of this this change mindset, this real willingness to flex and reimagine customer service, is about shortening the thinking and doing loop, right? Moving instead into a bias for action. The reason for this is because I think, as we all know, you're not going to make the right decision for 1 year from now today. You can't. We can't predict things like pandemics and economic issues. What we can do is have an idea of where we want to go and then make plans for the next step and the step after that, and continue to make it a sequential plan. And that's really how we start to eat this pizza one slice at a time. Next slide, please. As we think about shortening that think-do loop, it's a truly agile mindset, right? I know agile is a buzzword that a lot of folks get intimidated by or have thoughts about, but what you're really talking about with agility, lowercase a, not capital A, is the ability to move quickly and to flex as you need to, right? It is important to define where you're going, but you can't spend 6 months defining where you're going, because at the end of that 6 months, you might be far past the place where what you were intending to do was useful, right? So the agile methodology allows us to break into steps and iterate on the things that need iteration, right? Think of an idea based on data, try and build a POC around it, build a small thing around it, and then iterate from there until you have something that is lovable, something that can be released to the field and really pleasing to customers. Next slide, please. As we think about what you can do then with that iteration, these things, these North Star roadmaps, can tie into that progression to create a true, crawl, walk, run, jump methodology of how a particular customer can evolve, right? This is not about how industries evolve. It's not how broad segments of society evolve. It's about that particular customer. One of the things I like to say to clients is that, in the legacy way of thinking, you very much had to wrap the way you did business around the technology that you purchased. The freedom that you get with AWS and a lot of modern technology is to instead rethink that and map the solutions that you build around how you want to do business. And that flexibility, that ability to iterate quickly and to build small but think long, is what enables that kind of personalized transformation for our clients, which allows them to provide that differentiated reimagined service to their customers, to provide the personalization to their customers. And that really becomes the way to finalize those changes and to really implement that change that we're talking about.
That's great, Sean. Thank you. Well, just a quick question before I let you go. So I kind of wanted to circle back around on that point of the North Star. And if you look at all the different paths that you need to take, and I don't think even the data element was on there, but there are lots of different things you need to consider, sub projects, to do it well. You don't want to just lift and shift and like take what you have operating today and when you go to cloud, just make that work in the cloud. Take that opportunity to review a ton of things in your business, people and processes and your data and so on. That all sounds like a really big project, right? So, and yet on the other hand, you kind of talk about crawl, walk, run. Can you address like that tension between there's a lot of things to manage here, but we can get you going really quickly, or is that even possible?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a fantastic exercise, right? The idea of how do you get started seems like we're talking about things for large organizations who are looking to spend tons and tons of money. But the real principle here, kind of shortening that think-do loop and really reimagining how you approach CX, is absolutely a thing that can be done on the small, on the cheap. And the real way to do that is to locate those targets of opportunity, right? A couple of key clients that we've done recently, they've started with just a couple of phones in a department that didn't really have a lot of formalized processes. And so as they started to think about how to grow those teams, it's how do you just build some POCs around those, couple, 3 people. That location of the targets of opportunity that you can start with allow you to break that pizza down into slices so that you don't get intimidated by the fact that, man, we need a knowledge base to drive agent assistance, and our knowledge base is in a terrible state, or I don't know how to think about doing reporting because our reporting data is all over the place, and some of it we don't even have or know how to decipher, right? That location of those targets of opportunity help you to start building that roadmap that makes it easier to then diagnose and digest those larger issues. So absolutely a thing that you can start small. And in fact, that's the encouraged method, is to start small.
Really interesting. Thank you. Good. Okay, well, let's now turn to a real story of migration onto Amazon Connect that Accenture delivered. Whenever I hear Duncan speak on the subject, I always learn something new and come away with even more respect for what he and his team achieved. The scale and the complexity was large. As I mentioned, he has effectively 250 separate contact centers and 10,000 users with a very hard deadline. So Duncan, take us through your story.
Thanks, Nathan. Hi, everyone. As Nathan said, my name's Duncan, and I've been leading Citizens Advice's work to transform our contact center capability for the past 2.5 years. And that's what I'm going to talk a bit about today. But before I do that, I just wanted to say a little bit about what it is that we do as an organization, just to make sure that everyone's got some context about the journey that we went on. So we provide free advice and support to anyone who needs it across England and Wales. It's a multi-service, multi-channel setup, paid for by a combination of direct government grant and individually won contracts. And our phone service, which is what I'm here to talk about today, So just under 2 million users last year, serviced by as many as 10,000 agents, with another million or so clients being seen through face-to-face or other remote channels, such as web chat. Now, we're a federation. I work for the national organization, who are responsible for providing, amongst other things, contact center technology that's used to provide services. But most of the actual public-facing work that we do is, as Nathan said, done locally by over 250 independent, legally separate organizations. This means that the staff in face-to-face offices across England and Wales, the agents who take the phone calls, they're all independent from us as a national organization. And we think that we do a reasonable job. Our NPS is +87, and using Treasury methodology, we deliver roughly £4.5 billion of value to the people of England and Wales every single year. Do you want to move the slides on one or two, Nathan? So historically, we've always seen ourselves as a locally based face-to-face organization. And we know that being rooted in communities across England and Wales is a huge source of strength and really important for our clients and for our staff. But this kind of focus on locality has meant that we haven't always got the best out of remote channels. Now this is changing, and that change has been driven by two main factors. Number one was that our previous platform was approaching end of life, and number two was the pandemic. The pandemic changed attitudes to remote advice provision, both within and without citizens' advice. So before the pandemic, a lot of our organization believed that phone advice would always come second to face-to-face. Now, part of that is due to the nature of our staff and our volunteers and their motivation. Coming into an office rather than feeling like you're working in a contact center is important to our agents. And although we've got nearly 10,000 paid staff across our whole network, we've got more than twice that number in volunteers. It was also the case that before the pandemic, clients told us that they mostly wanted to see us face-to-face, but COVID changed everything. Firstly, as so many people would have done, we simply had to shift everything to remote. There wasn't a choice. And in the circumstances, everyone did everything they could to make it work, whatever their preconceptions. The second thing is that clients actually liked it. It worked. And then thirdly, clients now tell us that remote advice, and specifically phone advice, is their preferred way to get help from us. So we're in a situation where we simply needed a new platform, and we knew that phones were both more viable and more important than they'd ever been. And so what we did was launch a public procurement process to find a platform that we could use to fulfill our ambitions for remote advice. Before I talk a little bit about our requirements and our decision when it comes to procurement, I just want to touch on a couple of the unique characteristics that made this particularly challenging as a piece of work. Firstly, as I mentioned earlier, we're a federation. We don't directly deploy any of our advisors, our agents. We operate across a whole range of different technologies and org structures and financial models. We don't control the physical or digital estates, and we needed a partner and a solution that could cope with that complexity. The second thing is about usability and accessibility. Now we have both a legal obligation and a moral commitment to provide our staff with accessible software. And we've also got a volunteer pool who we know are not always particularly comfortable with technology. So we needed a solution that would work really simply and work for everyone. And then the third thing, and Nathan mentioned this one earlier, was that we had a hard deadline. Mid-March this year to complete migration. At that point, legacy platform turned off. If we haven't finished migration, we no longer have phone services. So we needed a platform that could be stood up quickly and a partner that could cope with working at that kind of speed. So bearing in mind that time was a huge pressure, we did the only logical thing and decided to run the most complex and longest procurement process possible. Now, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into the details about that. Instead, and if you want to move on a slide, Nathan, what I'm going to do is just focus on the criteria at a high level that led us to select Amazon Connect in partnership with Accenture for our new contact center platform. And the 6 principles that you can see on the screen now, these were things that we set out very early in the process. as part of the kind of guiding criteria for ensuring that the platform that we were procuring was aligned with where we wanted it to go. So interoperability is number one, not something that our legacy platform had. We use AWS products for data storage and data management and reporting. We have our own case management and content management systems. And we in Connect have chosen a product that we can connect into these things so that we can get massive efficiencies and synergies from all the work that we do. Flexibility is really important to us. As we've just heard earlier on, it's impossible to define today the answer to all of the problems we're going to face over the next 5 years. And with the AWS setup of no contracts, paying for what you use, we've been able to start with a relatively simple phones implementation. And then we have reserved for whenever we want to the option to start adding in some of those other AWS products, such as Contact Lens, whenever we want to. So we've been able to start and instead of having to sign a contract for all the services we think we're going to use, we tackled the most important one, the time critical change, delivered that, and then we can add additional capabilities at the pace that we want them to. And that's really important to us. Scalability is important as well. Our workforce grows and shrinks across the course of the year. It needs to change in relation to demand and the needs of the public and our funders. But there's also scalability questions around things like SSO integration, which is something that our previous platform didn't have. And to give you an idea of how important that is for us, we previously committed around 3.5 FTE simply to user management, provisioning, resetting passwords, tens of thousands of tickets, thousands of hours, just getting people onto the platform. With integrated SSO, we've been able to devolve control of users down to all those 250 independent members. They can manage the users effectively, and the national team can instead spend their time actually driving improvements, delivering value, increasing the quality of our service. Reliability is important, not something we previously had. We've now got a product built on AWS's world-class cloud platform, and accessibility is really important as well. And thanks to Accenture's Unified Agent Portal, UAP, that Nathan talked about earlier, we have an interface that is usable and accessible for all of our advisors. And then finally, lurking away in the bottom corner there, the kicker to them all, affordability. And this is where that consumption-based charging is really important for us. You know, the number of agents we have working on any given day can vary by 100%. And so any setup where we have to commit a fixed number of seats is going to be cost inefficient. Because we only pay for what we use with AWS Connect, we are much more efficient than we were before. So those were the kind of 6 criteria that underpinned our procurement process and the reasons why we ended up picking Accenture in partnership with Amazon Connect. I guess the final question is probably, how's it going? How did it go? And the answer is pretty well. It's unlikely I'd be here talking if that wasn't the case. Broadly, in terms of what happened, we started our design work with Accenture in May 22, about 2 days after we'd signed contracts. And we rolled out a training environment in August of that year. And that was a really big step, given our user base, given the complexity of our setup, having a pretty much fully functional training environment, along with e-learning, training materials, videos, everything that we need to get our users onboarded in August was really important. In September last year, we took the first of our 19 services live, and over the following 7 months, we successfully migrated the other 18 services onto the platform. And by March the 7th, 2023, 1 week before our hard deadline, we finished our migration, having provisioned over 10,000 users. And at that point, we were taking over 2,000 simultaneous calls. And although it's early days, we have seen some significant benefits. We've seen a surge in demand, but we've broadly been able to maintain our service levels. They vary. We're running 19, 20 services actually on the platform now, so there isn't one simple metric to point to. We've been able to rationalize our phone lines. When I say rationalize, we had nearly 900 separate phone lines on our old platform. We managed to bring that down to around 400, and in a couple of months' time, we're going to shave it down even further. We've made those kind of efficiency savings that I already talked about when it comes to things like integrated SSO. And then I think most excitingly of all, less than 2 months after we finished this kind of mass migration, we set up a brand new 20th service on the Connect platform by ourselves. The team that had been working alongside Accenture and AWS during the migration had reached the point where they had the capabilities and the skills and the confidence that we could provision our own services without having to rely upon external partners. And it's working really well. And for us, that ownership, that control is just a huge step forwards. Why did it work? Hard work for a start, and quite a lot of it for a fairly long time. Being cloud-based makes so many things simple, particularly when, in our case, we don't even control the physical estate, don't even necessarily know where it is. That was absolutely essential. We had great support from our partner on AWS, and this kind of crawl, walk, run approach has demonstrated its value, as we can see from our ability to create that new 20th service all by ourselves. And we had a partner who could cope with those unique characteristics, federation, accessibility, a crushing deadline, and then good people at AWS, at Accenture, and of course, good people at Citizens Advice. And we've got exciting plans for the future. We currently operate across other channels. We need to move them onto Connect. We want to add more services. We are having meetings with AWS this week to discuss and experiment using Contact Lens. We're already seeing better data reporting as we build out our improved data pipeline. And in the medium term, we'll be thinking about integrating our case management solution. And there's just so many things that we now have the ability to do that are going to help us better serve our clients and connect even more people to the help that they need.
That's great. Thank you, Duncan. I learned something again today after listening to you speak again. So thanks for that. I want to pose one question to you, which is possibly dangerous. Well, what do you know now, having gone through this massive migration project, that you wish you'd known at the beginning?
That is a good question. There's probably some knowledge internal to Citizens Advice that I wish I'd known I'd had, but I don't think that's very helpful for this audience. So I think there's maybe two things I'd pick out. One was right at the start of the work, I was advised by a consultant we brought in that number porting seems very simple, trivial administrative task, actually going to take a really long period of time. And I believed him, and we started working on it really early. That turned out to be one of the most painful and biggest threats to the program that there was. And if I'd known just how serious it was going to be, we'd have invested even more resource into it up front, just to make sure that it didn't become a blocker. Because it is one of those things where if you haven't got the paperwork, you can't do it, and it doesn't matter if you've done everything else. There's no way around it. I think the other thing that maybe we'd have done differently, certainly I'd have done differently based on what we've learned. And this reflects maybe a bit on some of the things that Sean said earlier, was I think around data, as is often the case with this kind of piece of work, reporting slightly gets shunted to the end because it's often something you can't maybe start work on until you've finished some elements of your service design. If I could go back, based on what we know now, I think I'd have found a way to put a bit more resource earlier on into getting all of our reporting structures ready. It's coming online now, and we're seeing some really great results and better insights into client journeys and really interesting lessons that we're beginning to draw. But I think probably we put a bit too much pressure on ourselves to deliver that at the pace we're having to work on it. So I would have had that strand, that piece of the work start earlier and maybe be a bit better resourced. But then I don't really know at the end of it if the answer you give is I would have used more resource to deliver the work. It's not often the case that isn't true, right? But yeah, those are probably two of the things that I've taken away from it.
I'm going to hazard a guess that there is no other customer that Connect has had to migrate 900. Well, I know we didn't do 900, but 900 separate phone numbers from 250 separate, effectively completely separately run organizations needing paperwork, like a massive challenge. And huge kudos to you and your team for having pulled off what you have. Like really amazing job. Thank you, Duncan.
Thanks, Dave.
Good. Well, we've come to that stage of the webinar where we're going to open it up for questions. So if you do have a question, please put it in the chat, and we will be pulling out questions and addressing them as a team. So thank you again for listening to the presenters, and we're going to switch into Q&A mode.
Hi, Nathan. So we are actually out of time, and we are not going to be able to take any live questions today. But to everyone, if you do have any questions, feel free to send them in over the next 30 or so seconds, and we will be sure to send these over to the team, and they'll be able to respond to you after the fact via email. So I would like to remind everyone that this session was recorded. Should you want to rewatch it, you will be receiving an email with a link to access the recording on demand. And of course, you can find it living on the DevOps website at devops.com/webinars, and be sure to look in the on-demand section where it will be waiting for you. I would like to thank AWS and Accenture for sponsoring our program today. A big thank you to Nathan, Sean, Dilnison, and Duncan for joining us live today. And to our audience, thank you so much for joining us for the past hour. You'll see in the chat and in the sticky note that I've put a link to our post-webinar survey. Please feel free to fill that out for us. We'd love to hear your thoughts about our program. If you don't click those links, we will also just funnel you there after we do close out the program. So just stick around for one last second. So thank you so much for sticking around. I appreciate our speakers being here as well. And everyone can now disconnect. Thanks for being here. Bye, everyone.